In this video, I want to show you how to build a barn. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. The channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. This is why I need a barn. I need a storage solution for this Bobcat, and I just happened to get contacted by Mike from Best Barns. He said, hey, do you need a storage solution for any equipment or anything in general? I said, yes. In fact, I got a Bobcat that needs place to keep out of the weather in the wintertime. He said, perfect. I have a barn kit that's going to suit your needs. He sent the barn kit out to me in return for making this video. And I must tell you, working with Mike from Best Barns was super simple. They have a very customer-friendly response to every question I had. If you have any questions about any of their barn kits, Mike from Best Barns is definitely the person you want to call and ask for. So I definitely recommend contacting Best Barns. So we're going to have a storage solution for this Bobcat at the end of this video, so stay tuned for the whole thing. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Best Barns. If you're not familiar with Best Barns offer DIY kits for sheds, garages, and obviously barns. And one thing great about them, if you go right to their website, you can pick out exactly what you want, order it, and it arrives to your location, and then you put it together yourself, which is awesome for DIYers to save money. One of the greatest advantages to using Best Barns is not only is all the material on site from start to finish, the roof system's already pre-cut, the stair stringers going up to the loft are pre-cut. A lot of things are done for you ahead of time, so it makes the assembly go much quicker than if you're going to order the material and cut it all yourself. You still have some cutting to do yourself. So with this DIY kit, you're going to save a lot of money and labor, and you're also going to save a lot of time because a lot of things are already pre-done for you. The best barn kit that I ordered that I'm going to be assembling in this video is the Handcrafted Homestead XL with transom door. And I actually got two transom doors. And something I'd like to mention here, as you watch this video, the layout that you see online is going to be different than the one I'm building on site. It's going to be the same dimension, 16 wide by 32 long. And yes, that is a big barn that can come in a kit, so keep that in mind, which is really cool. But if you want to modify the plans at all, which that's what I requested to do, they will work with you some, but don't expect a huge amount of change to the floor plan. But I did want to mention they will modify it. The great thing about Best Barns is that you can order their barns through Lowe's, Home Depot, directly off their website. And there's many other locations in which you can purchase their barns. So that's one thing really cool to keep in mind. And I'll put a link in the description below to the exact barn that I'm building in this video. Also, how did delivery go in general? The delivery came in 3 different trucks, 2 from Lowe's. So the material that you see on the upper side of this hill, the framing material, the plywood, the LP SmartSide, the 2x4s, that all came from Lowe's in 2 different trucks. And it also supplied the door, the felt paper, the drip edge for the roof, and those types of things. Then there was a third-party carrier that delivered these 2 pallets, and these came directly from Best Barns. That's the roof system, that's the stair stringers, that's the hardware, that's the transom doors. So there are critical components in these 2 crates, of course. That's going to be the process to expect for delivery. If you plan on ordering a garage, barn, or shed from Best Barns, you want to make sure before placing your order that it falls within the guidelines of your HOA if you plan on placing it in a subdivision. Also, be sure to purchase a building permit. You want to make sure that you build it to specs with your local jurisdiction, and you may not need a building permit depending on the location and structure in which you plan on building. I did need a building permit, so I already secured that. You will need to have a foundation in place for your Best Barns kit. I did a monolithic slab. If you've been following my channel, you've seen me do that in previous videos. You could also place runners on gravel and then put 16 on center joists and then place subfloor over that and build on top of that if it's going to be something like a workshop or just for storage. But I plan on placing heavy equipment on my foundation, so I needed concrete. So it's going to be up to the property owner to have the foundation ready to go on site before building the garage, barn, or shed. After delivery, what I recommend that you do is locate the assembly book that's going to be on the side of one of the crates. Read through it thoroughly and definitely study it to see what you're about to get into, and that you know what to expect while you're building your barn. I recommend unpackaging the material initially so that way if you're missing anything, you can contact the supplier to get that on site before you run into a shortage while you're building. Something really important I'd like to mention, these boxes are the extension boxes because I ordered a 32-foot building. This has the additional joist hangers, it has the additional roof system, all that is here in these boxes. So if your building is a longer building, you want to make sure you check these additional boxes for your additional supplies. Best Barns will supply all the necessary screws and nails to assemble your building. I like to use a framing nailer. I do have to purchase my own nails for this. I like to use galvanized nails whenever nailing through pressure treated material. The nails are going to hold up much longer because the pressure treated material can eat up non-galvanized nails. And when nailing together standard lumber that is not pressure treated, I'm going to use standard nails through my nailer. The non-galvanized framing nails are going to be 3 1/4. The galvanized nails are going to be 3 inch, and that's going to be sufficient for this assembly. And I'm going to begin by building the rear wall in the back. The first pallet you'll need to unbox is the pallet A. Pallet A is going to have your hardware in it. You can see we got our nails, which I already explained are going to be not using the hand drive nails. I'm going to be using my framing nailer, but if you are going to hand drive, they're all right there. We got our joist hangers for our floor joists. We got wood glue for our headers. We got screws. We got roof clips. We got Tico nails for the joist hangers. That's all here. Our first wall is going to be the rear wall. And we have 2 different types of 2x4s here for our plates. Our bottom plates are going to be built using pressure treated lumber because we're going to be in contact with the concrete, or even if you're doing this with a wood floor, this is going to be sent for your bottom plate. And then for our top plate, we're going to be using standard 2x4 material. This is not pressure treated, so we got 8 footers for both of these. And the 8 footers are going to be cut down to 92.5 inches for our rear wall. So we got to cut 2 pressure treated 92.5 inches, then 2 regular 2x4s 92.5 inches. I'm going to be using a circular saw to do most of the cutting. This is going to be the best DIY option there is for making your cuts. If you have a miter saw, that's even better for most of your cross cuts. But a circular saw is great because you can do your cross cutting, your rips, you can rip down your plywood with it, all that. So I highly recommend having a circular saw for most of the build. I'm going to show you how to mark a 2x4 using a speed square and pencil and then cutting it with the circular saw. Pulling off the end of the 2x4, I'm going to mark 92.5 inches. And then we're going to put an X to cut on that side of the line. Using the speed square, we're going to make a straight line off the edge of the 2x4, and that's what we're going to follow to make our cut. That's all there is to cutting a 2x4 with a circular saw. For each wall, we're going to chalk a line off the edge. We're going to measure over 3.5 inches on this side and over there. And then we're going to chalk a line from mark to mark so you have a straight line to go with. These forms on the exterior, when we form the concrete, might not be perfect, so we don't want to go off that. We want to go off a chalked line. And you can see we now have a straight line to go with whenever we stand our wall up. I'm going to line my 2 plates up that are 92.5 inches that we cut with that line. And I'm going to stay back about 3 inches from the edge. I made this slab an inch shorter than 16 feet, so that way the LP Smart siding will definitely be overhanging the concrete. You do not want that in contact with the concrete. Then take your top plate and we're going to line that up with the bottom plate. This is the rear wall that we're getting ready to build. You can see I had the plans changed where the transom door is here, and on the other wall there's one right in the center. So I do need to make sure I frame this out to the layout I want. And over here it's just blank wall where the stairs are going when we get to that point. So that's what we're going to focus on now, is laying out with this 8-foot transom door here. Because I modified the plans to have the 8-foot door here, it's going to be different than what's in the assembly book. So keep that in mind. So how I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to put my layout for the 8-foot door and then for the studs, but it is going to be different than what's in the instructions. Like I mentioned, because of the door on this wall, this is going to be laid out different than what's in the instructions. I'm first going to burn 3.5 inches to allow for this wall that's going to sit here. I'm going to come over to our first 16 on center layout and come back 3/4 inch and mark 15 1/4 essentially. Then we're going to place an X here where the stud sets, and then we're going to place that layout 16 on center down the whole wall. At each area we place the layout, use a speed square. Then we're going to mark from plate to plate, then place an X on the one that does not have an X, and that way the layout is on both the bottom plate and top plate. Because I want the beginning of this transom door tight against this wall, I need to place my king stud, then jack stud tight into this corner. So we're going to lay that out now. So that's going to be the edge of what we call the jack. We'll then pull 8 foot off this line to mark the edge of the opening for our next jack. We can now pull off this edge and mark 8'3" to the edge of our next jack. 8'3", then we know we'll have our jack, then our king stud. So we can mark the edge of that at 8'6". For the 2 transom doors, I got 2x8s that are 10 foot long, and I have to cut all 4 of these down to 99 inches. The rough opening is going to be 8 foot wide. So because we got a trimmer on each side of 1.5 inches, it's going to bring us down to 8 foot wide once we have this installed. So we're going to cut these to 99 inches. What we'll need for the header is this 2 foot wide, 4 foot long piece of plywood, and it was right under all this towards the bottom. I just pulled it out with my hammer. So we're going to have to rip this down for the headers. In order to pad out the header, we're going to rip down this piece of OSB to 7 1/4 inches, and we're going to place the strips in between the 2x8 material to give us the right width, which is 3.5 inches, to match the wall. In order to assemble the header, we're going to begin by placing wood glue on one of the 2x8s, and we want to make sure that our sheathing is going to be 1.5 inches from the edge so that it lines up properly. So we're going to place the wood glue and the sheathing down first. We're now going to place more wood glue on top of that. We're then going to place the next 2x8 and sandwich them together. And we need to make sure that our edges are flushed up and that our ends are lined up. You can use a speed square for this. Just line it up with the flat 2x4s, then just butt them right to it. Very straightforward. Now that we got everything lined up, we're going to place 2 nails a little over 1 foot apart across the whole header on both sides. And that's all there is to assembling the header for the transom door. We now need to build what we call jacks to hold up the door header. We need to cut down 2 pre-cuts to 82 inches to give us the correct height. And then the other 2 pre-cuts are going to act as the king stud. Then we're going to nail them together. So we need to first cut 2 of them down to 82 inches. To nail these together, very simple. We just line up the bottoms so that they're flush and then nail them with 2 nails, again about every foot or so. And that's going to create what we call the jacks. And a little tip here, if you have a rough side on a 2x4 like you see here, we like to turn that to where it's sandwiched in the middle and it's not exposed on the outside. It just looks a little better that way, and it's a good place to hide rough lumber. So we can see that looks good. All right, so we're now going to nail these together. And we just work this like trim. We just line up the edges here about halfway up where they go together. Place another nail right here. So now we know that it's all flush to here, so we can nail this off. And then come up here to the very end, flush this up. We now have our 2 jacks to hold up our header. We're going to lay out for the door first, and we're going to shoot it together on the layout. So we're going to lay the header, then our 2 jacks on each side. A good idea whenever you place your studs in the wall or your jacks is to eyeball down them. And if it does have a crown, you want the crown up so that way everything is crowned the same direction. To secure the header to the king stud, we're just going to flush it up and make sure that we're setting tight on top of the jack. And we're going to place 4 nails into this upper end of the header, then 4 nails into the lower end of the header. And do that to the other side. It's now time to secure the top plate and bottom plate to the opening. I'm going to take the top plate up here and we're just going to line up flush with the end of this jack stud, which was the beginning of our layout. And then we're going to nail the bottom on as well in the same manner. We're going to place 2 nails in each stud. I'm going to take the 92 5/8 inch pre-cuts and lay them out on the rest of the layout and nail them into place. To finish above the header, we got to place blocks on the layout. Now the assembly guide shows just placing one in the middle, then spacing them evenly, because they really don't have to be on a layout per se, because it's just going to have your LP side go across this. So with that being said, I'm going to place on the layout though, because that's just what I do when I build. This is going to be 3 1/8 inch heavy. So we got to cut 8 blocks to fill in across this top. When I place a nail from the header side, I obviously can't get my nail gun in to toenail it, so I just toenail it in from the header, then into the block from this side, then place 2 nails just like I typically would for any other stud on this side. Here at the bottom of this door opening, where the 2 plates come together, you can see there's no stud here, so I'm going to join it together using a block. Now the reason why this is because again, I modified the plans and this is where it broke, but you probably won't have this issue if you're going with the standard layout that came with best barns. Now that we have our rear wall framed up, we're going to frame up 2 8-foot walls to go on each side of that. And that's going to be the beginning of our side walls. To make the 2 walls, I got 2 2x4 pressure treated that's 8 foot long, and I got 2 non-pressure treated that's going to be the top plates. And we're going to make sure they are exactly 8 feet long a piece. And we know that the non-pressure treated are already at 8 foot exactly, so we need to cut the pressure treated down because they're a 1/2 inch longer than 8 foot. What I'm going to do is place my layout here while we are on the sawhorse, because it's way easier to do it here than on the ground. And I'm going to pull 15 1/4 inch to start the layout. So every 16 on center mark, come back 3/4 of an inch, and that's going to be where we place our stud. And then the X is going to be where it sits. So that's how you do a 16 on center layout. Throughout the process of building this barn, you will have to get very familiar with placing a 16 on center layout. And the trusses are a 2 foot on center layout, just so you know. So again, make sure you do this accurately. So once you place your layout onto the plates, then we'll want to transfer the marks onto the other plate after you line them up together perfectly using a speed square. You can see we're going to draw a line from plate to plate, and that way you're going to get a very accurate layout that way, so it will be exactly the same from plate to plate. So if you haven't done a layout before, that is how you do it. Not very complicated, but if you've never done it, it's something that has a slight learning curve. And now we place the same layout on the other 2 that we cut. And I do not have any windows in these 2 walls, but I will in the walls after this. To set the side walls, we have to do the same thing we did with this rear wall. We have to measure in, and this time we're going to go with 3 inches because the slab's a little smaller, like I said, so we have plenty of overhang so our board does not come in contact with the ground or concrete. And we're going to measure over 3 inches, and we'll chalk a line down this side of the slab. Yep. Okay. We're going to stand up the rear wall now and anchor it. They recommend in the assembly guide that you secure it with a brace on the inside of the building, but since there's a concrete slab, I do not want a Tapcon in the middle of the slab, so I'm going to place a brace once we stand it from the inside of this door opening and go out to the ground with a metal stake to secure it. We're going to plumb it up into place. And the reason why it's better to have it on the inside if you can is because whenever you put your LP smart siding on, then they're going to be out of the way, but we'll have to address that once we start putting on our siding. There's my kind of walls. All right, awesome. That was pretty easy with two guys. We're going to place our brace here down to the ground. I'm going to use a pre-cut and slope it down and have it right up into the opening like so. All right, and while he's holding it, I'm going to make sure we are on our chalk line. We're going to make sure we are plumb. All right, that looks pretty good there. He's going to hold it while I drive a stake to secure it to the ground. I like to use metal stakes that have the holes in them so we can drive a screw into the brace. Just going to place it right up against that 2x4 and drive it down tight. And I'm going to have him double check to make sure we're plumb, and when we're plumb, I'm going to place a screw through the stake and into the stud. Okay, we're temporarily held with this brace. We now need to anchor the bottom plate to the concrete pad. If there are anchor bolts sticking up through the concrete pad, obviously I would have just drilled out for those and then you'd place a nut on it to hold it down to the pad. But I'm going to Tapcon it because I do not have anchor bolts. These are 3 3/4 inch Tapcons more or less. They're actually by Simpson Strong Tie. They're called Titan Turbo. They're more or less just like Tapcons. So it came with the drill bit and I'm going to pre-drill through the plate and into the concrete. Be sure to use a hammer drill when drilling out concrete. Using a 5/16 driver bit, I'm going to drive the Tapcon into the hole. We're now secured to the concrete. Now we want to do this at least every 4 foot apart, but we're just going to temporarily secure it a couple places on the wall until we stand them all up. Then we'll Tapcon appropriately after that. All right, for the next wall, we're just going to slide it down, and this is going to go in behind this wall we already stood up. It's just going to be flush with the very end of it. We can actually attach this to the wall we already stood, and it's going to hold it temporarily, and we're going to place a couple Tapcons in the bottom to hold it. I'm up here on the step ladder. I'm going to pull these over flush with each other. Then we're going to place a nail to hold them together at top. We now have our two walls intersected and connected. We now need to build the rest of the side walls. All we have to do here is repeat the process we did for the 8-foot walls, except these are going to be two 12-foot walls on each side to finish up the whole run of 32 feet. Same idea, 16 on center layout, and this is going to have windows in it, so we got a layout for that after we mark it on the ground and lay it out. So for now, we're just going to cut to 12-foot length and put our layout on it and then lay it into place. For this front wall, we're going to have a transom door right in the center that's 8-foot rough opening. I'm going to make the header now the exact same way I made the rear wall header. The two side walls have windows in them, and the windows do not have to come from Best Barns. You can order any window you want. I'm actually going to get mine from Lowe's, and they're going to be a rough opening of 36 inches wide and 36 inches tall. And I'm going to place the layout on my wall plates now. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It's very simple and straightforward. Essentially, it's the same idea as the door. We're going to come over 3 inches, and we're going to put this as our jack, and this is going to be our king stud. And we're going to come over 36 inches from that and place our next jack. Going to mark 36 inches for our rough opening, and then come over 3 inches for our edge of our jack. We got our king and jack, and place that layout here on the plates. And that's all there is to placing the layout on the plates, and we're going to do the same for the door. This is where I'm going to place the side entry door. Now with the entry door, I did order this directly through Best Barnes, but it was delivered by Lowe, so essentially you could even go to Lowe's and get it yourself. So just like the windows, it's very customizable how you want to build your barn, garage, or shed. So I'm going to place the layout for that here, and it's going to be a 32-inch door, so the rough opening width is going to be 34. You always add an inch on each side, and the height's going to be 82 for the rough opening. So we're going to place the layout here now. Here's a tip to save on material. We know there's going to be a stud here, so we can use this as our king stud and then place our jack on that side for our side door. And that's something that's just going to help save material just because we can place this where we want. So we're going to go over and mark the edge of that. Then we're going to measure 34 inches off that edge. Then we'll have our jack and king stud. Place our layout here. And we know this is for our door. It's going to be the same concept on this wall. I'm going to place 2 windows spaced evenly off the edge. We're going to have a 36-inch window tied up against this wall. Then we're going to pull off 8 foot to match this side, so it's same equal distance off the edge of the barn. So we're going to place the layout here and then one over here for the same size window as the other wall. I'm now going to build the jacks and headers for the windows and door. In this case, we're just going to use 2x10s because they are on the load-bearing side of the wall, and I did purchase these separate from what was sent with Best Barnes because they were windows that I chose, so I have to supply the material to build those openings as far as the headers. Now with that said, they did send the material for the 2x10s for the entry door, so I have that supplied by Best Barnes. So essentially all you have to do here, if you have a, let's say, window or door that's a 36-inch rough opening, you just add 3 inches to make your header. So if it's 36-inch, we would have to cut it to 39-inch because after we place our jack, that's going to shrink it down, so you get the idea. So as long as the rough opening is the correct width after it's built. When I build these headers, I'm going to do exactly like I did when I built the header for the transom door. I'm going to place sheathing in between it to pad it out so it's the correct width of a 2x4. I'm going to show you how to frame a window opening. We first have our jacks and our header here in place where it's going to be installed on the wall. And I need to get my rough opening for my window. Again, check your window and see what your rough opening is. It's going to be unique for each window. And I'm going to measure down because my rough opening is 36 by 36 inches. I'm going to measure down 36 inches off the edge of my jack here. I'm going to make a mark. I'm going to line my jacks up together like so. Then we're going to put the layout here for it. So we know that's going to be our sill plate for when we put the opening together. If this is the top of the window sill, then we come down 1.5 inches. We're going to make another mark here, just so you can easily get the measurement for your window cripples. That's the stud underneath the window. And you can see we got 45 3/4 inch. We need to cut for 35 3/4 inch in this case. So if you just look at the layout on the wall, you can count how many you need and one at each side of the jack. So in this case, we need 4. I now attach the jack to the window header the same way we attach the jack to the door header. We're going to lay it into place and nail it in from the side of the jack into the header. Here's my 36-inch sill plate. I'm going to take the sill plate down here and trace the layout from the layout on the plates to the sill plate. We just line it up. We now have our layout on our sill plate. 4 46-inch boards cut for our cripples, and we're just going to line these up flush with the bottom of our jacks and nail them to each side first. For the 2 center cripples, we're going to place them on the layout that we placed on the sill plate from below. I'm now going to nail the sill plate to the cripple that we installed on each side of the jack. Now we just installed the window opening into the layout. So we'll nail the bottom plate and then the top plate on the upper and lower side of the window opening. Now that you know how to frame in a window, you follow the same principles that I showed you to build the doors and windows to finish the rest of the walls according to your plans. So I'm going to place together the rest of these walls and stand them up. To finish off this side door opening, we need to pad this down with two 2x4s to give us a finished rough opening of 82 inches tall and 34 inches wide. We're just going to pad it down with two 2x4s to get the correct rough opening. We now have the rough opening height 82 inches. At each door opening, we need to cut out the 2x4 plate that is still attached, and make sure if you have a concrete slab that you place a tap con on each side of the door before doing this. You don't want this opening shifting around. We're going to take a Sawzall, and I have the blade turned to where it's facing on the flattest side of it, and we're going to lay it flat like so and cut out this 2x4. We now have the plate removed from the bottom of the door. Something critical here, you want to make sure anywhere where you have the walls that line up and there's a joint, that you overlap with a 2x4 there. Let's say one of those shorter 8-foot sections, you don't want to put an 8-foot 2x4 there and have a break right where the wall break is. Again, same concept, you want to overlap the two walls so that you tie them together with the top plates. Okay, he has the one side of the 2x4 and I have the other, and this is a 16-footer. And we're going to place it flush with the wall here, and we're going to place it flush with the outside of the wall here. And we're going to place 3 or 4 nails here where it overlaps, and then place 2 nails every 18 inches or so across the whole top plate, and make sure you keep it flush with your plate. All right, you can see how that's laced in there. That's what you want at each corner. We're now going to continue running the plates around the perimeter of the walls. Now that all the exterior walls are stood up, they are braced, the tap cons are in, we want to make sure that the walls are setting plumb before continuing to the next step. Take your level at each corner, check to make sure it's setting correctly, and that looks really good. And this side's nice and plumb and looks really good. And even check in the middle of the wall. Also eyeball down the top of the wall to make sure no adjustments need made now. You want to make sure we have a nice straight line across the top of the wall as well. For the exterior of the barn, Best Barn sent what's called LP SmartSide panels. These panels are great. And the reason why they're so great is because they are already primed, they're moisture resistant, they're impact resistant, and they're going to be an excellent choice for any garage, barn, or shed. If you've been following my channel for the past year, you'll know I installed these panels when I built a shed. Like I mentioned, the panels come primed, so I do want to seal this bottom edge before installing them. It's very difficult to get this painted correctly later, especially next to the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and place a good heavy coat on now so we got a good sealed bottom. I'm going to use a high quality exterior paint. To begin installing the LP SmartSide panels, it's important to select the proper nails first. Best Barn sent 8-penny galvanized 2.5-inch nails for this installation. Again, they are hand-driven nails, but I'm going to be using 2-inch ring-shanked galvanized nails for my installation using a nail gun. Something really critical here when installing the nails, you do not want to sink them into the SmartSide panels very deep at all. You want to make sure that you nail it snug. You don't want to countersink it into the SmartSide panels because water will penetrate, and if you do, you can place sealant over that, then paint over it, and it isn't that big a deal, but you want to try to avoid that. You want to make sure your nails are snug, very important. I'm going to start here at this back corner. We want to start with the side wall to where the lap edge is going to be flush with the rear wall. Then the rear wall is going to overlap the side wall with its lapped edge. So that's something important to note. So we're going to begin here at this wall. When installing your panels on a wood foundation, you want to make sure that you overhang the bottom about 3/4 of an inch. Because I have a concrete slab here, I'm going to make sure that my panels are just flush with the bottom of the wall. And I want to make sure that I do not come in contact with the concrete or ground, very important. What I'm going to do is use the 10-penny nails that were sent by Best Barnes. I'm going to slide them right here underneath of the wall, and we're going to use that as a lip to hold the LP SmartSide to begin with, and I'm going to tap that in with a hammer. And I'm going to come over here about 3.5 feet to catch the other end, and we're going to place that nail here to catch this side. So that's going to give us an edge to sit our panel on. We're going to set the panel right on those nails. And then we're going to slide to make sure we are flush with the edge. We're going to go ahead and tack a nail here to hold it. All right, now we're going to place our level to make sure we're setting plumb. All right, let the bottom go down my way a little bit. All right, looks nice and plumb. All right, that looks good. And we want to make sure that we nail the perimeter every 8 inches, and then in the fields about every foot. So we're going to nail this off now. When nailing off the panels, I find it best to kind of start in one area and work your way out. That way it helps flatten this as you go. If you place a nail up in the corner, for instance, and a nail down here, then you're going to have kind of a bow in the middle. So you don't want to do that. You want to kind of work it out as you go and flatten it. To locate the stud, you can use every other groove. They are 16 inches apart. When placing the nail, as you can see, we are not sunk into the surface. We are just snug and tight. You want to make sure you don't countersink it. This one's sunken in a little bit too much. It's not too bad, but probably want to put a little sealant over that when we go to paint. Now that we got this side started, we're going to begin this side. Now this side, we just flush it up with the panel itself. We don't flush it up with the wall back here, so make sure we are flush with this edge. I'm going to remove these nails from the bottom, and then we're going to reuse them for when we install this panel and then all the other panels. Yep. All right, we're nice and flush to the wall here. We're going to tack a nail. And then we're going to make sure that we are plumb. Okay, we are now started off the corner of the barn. For the remaining panels, it's very simple. We just line the edge of the panel up with this groove right here so that it's going to look the same design as we go across. And that's the first important thing. Next important thing is make sure we line up our sheets with each other. Again, make sure they are plumb as you're running them, and it's as simple as that. And once we get to this window, we are not going to cut it out. We're just going to nail around it, but we will have to cut out 4 our braces because we want to keep the windows covered as much as we can until we get our windows in. So we're going to continue running these sheets now. Once you start running the LP SmartSide, you'll learn that it goes together pretty quick. You can see we want to nail where the lap edge laps the previous piece. And once we get to a brace, we take the brace off, place the panel over, then we cut out the panel to place the brace back into place. That was the best method we found so we can keep the windows covered up yet keep the bracing in the window and do the bracing on the exterior of the building. So all in all, installing the LP SmartSide is a very simple process. wanted to make sure I kept the panels up off the concrete, so I placed a piece of 1/2-inch OSB underneath of the panel before I installed it, and then removed it so that way it will be elevated up off the concrete. It's now time to begin installing the staircase going up to the loft. You need to locate the stair kit, and it's going to have everything you need to build for the landing. Has your stair stringers, has the treads, has it all right here ready to go, which makes it really nice, and it's all pre-cut as you can see. You need to find the assembly book for it, and this is for a 16-foot building, and that's what I have here. So we're going to start by placing the boards to connect the stringers together. The kit includes star drive screws, so make sure you have a star bit, and I also got an 1/8-inch drill bit to pre-drill before placing the screws. We're first going to put together the 2 longest stringers. We're going to need the pressure treated 2x6 that's 33 inches long, then the one that's not pressure treated that's 33 inches long as well. Then we need to locate the tread side and the rise side of the stringer. The tread side is going to be the longest part of the stringer. The shortest part, that's going to be the rise. The bottom of the stringer is going to be located down on this end. We're going to space apart the stringers in order to place the boards in between. We got to line up the board here at the bottom. It's going to be as if it's going to be against the floor after it's set up into place like so. He's going to hold this side, then I'm going to come over here on this side. We're going to use the 3-inch construction screws. It came with 2.5-inch as well. The 2.5-inch are going to be for the treads later. So we're going to go ahead and hold this flush at the end and at the bottom here. Then we're going to pre-drill before placing the screw. And do the same to the other side. We now need to do the same thing with the other board at the top. This board at the top, we need to picture it as if it's going to be anchored to the landing. So it's going to be right here flush at the back and flush at the top where the tread's going to be. We're going to repeat that process for the short set of stringers, except we ain't going to have the press treat at the bottom. We're going to have both regular lumber at the bottom and top. To build the landing, we have a 2x12 that's 48 inches long. Then we need to find the 2 2x6s that are 34.5 inches long. Then in between, these are 45-inch long 2x6s. So we need these to put together a platform, and we're going to do the same process, pre-drill, but we're going to put 3 3-inch construction screws at each joint, and this one's going to be centered right in the middle of the opening. So we're going to place this together now. All right, we got the landing frame here. We need to select a corner to install it. If you remember my plans, you know I'm going to install it on the same wall where we had the door offset to the left here. So we're going to install this right here in the corner. We want to make sure we put the 48-inch side that's going to be facing the 16-foot wall. So the 2x12 will be facing out this way, and then there will be the 48-inch side against this wall. So we need to make a level line at 52 inches up off the floor to guide us where to install the landing. Measuring up off the floor here in the corner, we're going to mark 52 inches. And this is going to be the top of our landing. We're going to take our level, then just level a line from that mark on both sides of the corner. We're now going to lift the landing up to those lines, then place 2 screws in each stud to support it. We're going to nail it with the nailer just to get it secured to the wall. Then we're going to reinforce it with the screws like I mentioned. We're going to place a 2x4 as a support here on this end. He's going to hold the level up here. Then I'm just going to tack this on with some nails to hold it. Now that we're sitting here temporarily, I'm going to finish securing it to the wall with 2 screws in each stud. Here is a good visual of the framing for the landing after it's all placed together. The floor on top of the landing is going to be the subfloor that we're going to use in the upstairs and the loft area. We just got to cut a 3-foot section off of a sheet to use as the top. And a little tip when cutting off of a pile, you obviously need to put a 2x4 down when cutting in the middle like so you don't cut through all of your subfloor. Before placing the subfloor down, we're going to use the wood glue that was sent. We're going to place a liberal amount right on top of the landing before placing the OSB subfloor. Using the 2.5-inch screws, I'm going to secure the subfloor down to the landing. Before placing the stringers up against the landing, we need to measure this rise right here because we need to know how far down to place the stringer on the landing. We got 7.5 inches on this one, and let's measure, make sure we're the same here. And we got 7.5 inches. So we know that's an important measurement to place over here onto our landing. And we also need to know our tread thickness, and I measured them and they're an inch thick. So we need to measure down an inch and then add the 7.5, so essentially 8.5 inches off the top of our subfloor to place our line. Measure down off this side, 8.5 inches. And again, it may be different depending on your stringers, but they should be close to this measurement. And 8.5 inches. Then we'll make a mark from line to line. And we are level as well, which is really important. So that is going to be where we mount our steps to. I'm just going to line the top of the 2x6 up with that line. All right, we are flush with the line here. Now I'm just going to tack nails here to hold it from moving for now. And because we're on concrete, we need to place a vapor barrier underneath of this stringer because it's going to help extend the life of this bottom plate. So we're going to slide a piece of felt under it. All right, very good. And we are tight against the wall. Because I'm sitting on concrete, I'm going to have to tap con through this pressure treated 2x6 into the concrete floor to secure it. Now, if you have wood here, you would simply nail it to the wood floor. So I'm going to go ahead and place 2 tap cons here now. Starting with the 6.5-inch riser board, we're going to place it right on the end of the stair steps and make sure that we hold it flush with the top of the stringer. And that we're flush the outside here. And I'm going to nail this on using my nailer, and it's the same nails I use to place the exterior panels on. They're just the ring shank 2-inch nails. Now they did send 6-penny nails to install these, so if you're going with the hand-driven option, they are in the kit. I'm going to install the 4 risers that are remaining before installing the treads. It's now time to install the treads. The treads have a rounded over side here, then a square side here. The square side is going to go right up against the riser, but we're going to place glue down first before screwing them down. We're going to place 3 screws on each side of the stringer to secure the treads down. I'm going to be using the 2.5-inch screws to secure these down. And if any wood glue comes out of the side, go ahead and wipe that off. And repeat that process for each tread. I'm going to place screws from the back of the landing into the steps to finish it off. When I nailed it earlier, I have not placed the screws there yet, but it would have been easier to do it before the treads, but it's okay. I'm going to place screws now to secure the stringers to the actual landing. Next, we need to build a 39.5-inch wall to set here, and that's going to be where this set of steps intersects into, and we have to build it to where it's 89 inches off the back wall to this area here, or off the sidewall, I should say. So we're going to go ahead and put the layout here on the concrete and on this wall. All right, we're going to butt our tape measure to that back wall and mark 89. Then come over about 3 feet, more or less, 39.5 inches. Then we're going to mark 89 again. Now we're going to mark a line from mark to mark. And our wall is going to sit on this side of that. And yes, I know right here where this opening is, this is the transom door, which is fine. I already knew that was going to happen. But when you open up the door, you're just going to see the end of a wall there. No big deal. So I'm going to build this wall now to fit into place. When it comes to placing your layout on a 39.5 inch wall, this is the side wall. We want to make sure our studs line up with these 2 studs for maximum strength, because our floor joists want to be able to line up here and here and get the load down evenly, and the most strength is there. So I'm going to lay this out and mark our studs here, and we want to make sure we continue that layout so that we intersect from stud to stud. We also need to mark for our 36-inch header board for our stairs, and that's going to hit right here. And this is going to sit on this side of the line. We're now going to use pre-cuts to build this wall. All right, I'm going to place this wall right here on our layout. And we're going to tap con it down to the line. We're going to plumb this up. All right, now that's plumb, we're going to anchor it to this wall. Locate the 2x12 that's 36 inches long. It's going to go flush with the top plate that we installed on the wall. This time, because there's no subfloor up here yet, we're going to measure down 7.5 inches, which is the same as the rise. Then we place our level line. And that's going to be to the top of our stringers. Now that this wall's set, we need to build a wall from here to this set of steps. Now you need to make sure you measure it. It calls for 53 inches, but it could vary a little bit. So I'm going to measure from this wall to the steps. I have 52 and 5/8, so it's a little different, which is fine. So we want to make sure that we're plumb when we get our measurement. We already checked this and we are setting where it's supposed to be. So we're going to cut our plates and build a 2x4 wall here. Nothing fancy, just 16 on center. To build this wall that's going to intersect into the wall we just built, we need to calculate, be able to come flush with this stud. If you don't have a window here, which you probably don't, this is just going to be a stud, so that's going to be to here. So we've got to measure off the landing and subtract 3.5 inches to compensate for the wall that's already sitting there. So my measurement is 6 foot, so if we subtract 3.5, that gives us 68.5 inches. The instructions call for 68.25, but make sure you measure yours because it could be different. So we're going to make the wall 68.5 inches, then stop it right here. Now that we got the plate cut, I want to show you the layout so you know how to lay it out to intersect into the stud. If we have our 3.5 inch block to represent the wall, we're going to place it here. And if we place this plate right against that, you'll see our layout is the same as the stud layout on this wall, because our joist is going to intersect into this wall we're going to build right here. So key concept, very important. Now that I have the walls framed up, I'm going to finish securing this landing. I actually cut a pressure treated board and I'm going to take it down to the floor right behind our brace. And that's going to add security to this landing. So we're going to nail that to that brace and also nail from the back of this 2x12 into the wall. We're going to set the next set of steps up into place, and we're going to line the top of that board up with that line that we drew on the 2x12. I now have it setting on the line. I'm going to nail it to the 2x12 and then to the bottom of the landing. I'm now going to place 3 fasteners in each one of the joists on the landing. I'm also going to nail at each stud on the wall through the stringer to secure it to the 2x4. I'm now going to finish this set of steps the same as we did the lower. We're going to start with the risers and then finish with the treads. I was extremely blown away by the quality of the stair kit. Everything went together really nice, and after it was all said and done, I must say it was probably one of the biggest highlights in general to the kit, just because everything was cut correctly and it went together smooth. I think you're going to be super impressed with it as well. Now that we have the exterior walls up, the stairs are built, we are now ready to install the header board. That's the 2x10 going around the top of the walls, and that's going to support the floor joist for the loft. Something really important here, you need to get your assembly book and open it up, and it will tell you exactly how long to cut your 2x10s to go around your building. So definitely open that up and check it out. We got the first 2 2x12s here that need cut the length. That's going to go across this wall and this wall to begin the header process. I located the 2 12-foot long 2x10s that are going to be the header board for this wall and this wall to start out with. I need to cut them down to 140.5 inch according to the assembly book. Now that we have our boards cut the length, we're going to get a measurement just to make sure we're going to break onto the first stud. And then after that, it's going to be 16 on center, just like the layout of the rest of the walls. At the top corner of this wall is where the board's going to start. We need to make sure we start our layout to break on this stud. Going to get the measurement right to the edge. We got 11 3/8, so we'll measure over 11 3/8 and start our 16 on center layout. You now need to locate the 2x10 joist hangers. You need a scrap 2x10 and the joist hanger nails. These are 1.5 inches, and there's also a box included as well with this little bag. And these are going to be installed using a dummy block first, because we want to make sure that we get it at the correct height. So if we line this up as if a joist is intersecting, then all we have to do is hold that into place our joist hanger, then we can install it here on the ground instead of doing it up off a stepladder, which is a little easier. And something to note about this, not every 2x10 is going to be the same width. So you want to get a scrap block that's going to be the average of all of them. And you'll still have some that are not perfect, but this will get you in the ballpark. I'm going to demonstrate how to put on one of these joist hangers, and then we'll place all of these on before installing the board. Here's the layout. I'm going to lay the scrap 2x10 block on the layout as if it was an actual joist. Make sure we are flush here. That's one of the most important parts, because that's going to be the lower side of the ceiling. And we're going to slide the joist hanger on. This side we're going to hold tight against the 2x10 block. Then we're going to remove it just for a second, and we're going to hammer in that little tab here to hold it into place. All right, place our block back into place, get back on the layout, double check, make sure we're still good. That looks good. And now the other side, we're actually going to let it come open just a little bit so we don't have any trouble putting our next joist in whenever we get to install the joist itself. We are now tacked on, and all we have to do now is nail off. We're using a nail in each one of the holes here on the board. And make sure that we stay square with the layout. Now the joist hanger is already installed off the ground. When we slide our joists in, we'll be ready to go. So we're going to do that on the whole layout on both headers. Now that we got the joist hanger on the header board, we're going to lift it up and line it up flush with the top of that wall. And we want it tight to that front wall. And then we're going to nail it every 3 inches apart across the top plate. And then we want to do it again on the plate right below it. So essentially you're going to have a row of nails 3 inches apart, and then 3 inches down, another row of nails 3 inches apart. Then place a nail in each stud towards the bottom of the board as you install it. And he's going to lift it up and down to make sure I stay flush with the top of that wall. So this definitely is going to be something that needs 2 people. So we're going to lift it up and then nail it into place. Right. All right, now that it's tacked on right here, going to place again every 3 inches apart across top, come 3 inches down, then 3 inches apart, and stagger it as you go. Then just continue that pattern as we go across the whole header board. When running the header boards, once you get to the area with the stairs, if you remember when we placed the layout here, we traced the layout of the studs from the exterior wall. That's so we can continue our header board on these walls so that our joists line up with the studs as well. So it's going to be the same concept as the exterior walls, except we're going to end here, then jump over to these walls to continue the header boards. Now that I have all the header boards installed with the joist hangers, I can now install the actual joists themselves. I have 2x10s that are 16 foot long for majority of the joists till we get to the staircase. Then we'll have to cut down 4 12-footers, then 2 8-footers to fit into place. These 16-footers are going to have to be cut down to 182 inches for this building. Be sure to refer to your assembly book to know the exact width that you need to cut yours down to. Now that our boards cut the length, we want to check for a crown. In order to do that, we're going to flip the board upright, eyeball down it, and if there's any hump, you want the hump up. So that way when there's weight, it pushes it down, flattens it out. So the crown is here. I'm going to put a little X so we know when we set this up into place, we're going to have this up. For this, you need 2 people. He's going to be on that end, and I'm going to carry this end up. And we're going to start in the middle, and we're going to slide it right into the joist hanger. All right. And we want to start in the middle because if we've got to pull the walls in, if they're sticking out some, that way you can do that now. And the rest of them, you won't have to fight it. So we're going to start in the middle, pull the wall in if it needs just a little bit here. And then we're going to take our nails that we use to attach the joist hanger and then nail through each hole on the joist hanger. Just a little note here, when we place these on, we actually just tack them with 1 on each side. Because I got a metal strap nailer I'm going to go through to nail everything off with. So for now, we're just going to put 1 hand nail on each side to hold it into place. So we're going to make sure we're tight here. We're going to drive a nail in through the hole into the joist. So we're just going to tack them all in for now and then nail it off here in a bit. Oftentimes a board will have a good and bad end. Be sure to cut the bad end off so that way you're left with the good part of the board. If you have a board that's twisted really bad, secure one end to the joist hanger and then go to the other end and hand drive the nails to drive the twist out. Most of the time you can get most of it out using this method. We have the last 16-foot joist in, and once we get to the last one, we're going to be intersecting into this wall. If you put the layout on correctly for the joist and this wall, it's going to line up perfectly. So this is actually snug against this staircase wall. So before anchoring it to this joist, we need to make sure that we are setting plumb. And we're setting plumb there. We're going to place nails to secure it to keep it in place. We can now continue with our 12-footers. We need to get a measurement from this wall to the exterior wall to get the length to cut them down to. Here, I'm going to hold the tape here tight. He's going to get the measurement to the exterior wall, 142 inches exactly. So we're going to cut all 4 of these 2 by 10 by 12 to that measurement. For these last 2 that intersect into the staircase, all we have to do is find the 2 8-foot 2 by 10s and then cut them to length. Now that we got all the joists set into place, we need to nail off the rest of the joist hangers. You can hand nail all these off like I showed you before, but I'm going to use what's called a metal strap nailer. It's going to nail this off pneumatically, which is going to be much quicker. So if you can get a hold of one of those, I'd recommend using one of those. But if not, hand driving is totally fine. I'm going to start my generator and then get the air compressor pumped up and show you how that works. You definitely want to wear eye protection when doing this. But all we have to do is place the nail right into the hole of the metal strap, pull the trigger. You can see that's much quicker than hand driving it. So that's the quickest way to put in these metal strap nails. I'm going to do this at every hanger on both sides. Now that we have the floor joists up, we can now install the subfloor on top of the joist for the loft. If you measure across this, we got 47.5 inches for how much coverage this is per run. It's going to take 4 rows to complete this building. So because of that, we're going to lose a 1/2 inch per run. So we're going to cheat in a little bit, 3/4 of an inch when we chalk our line for the first row. So we're going to measure over 48 3/4 inch off the edge of the building to start our subfloor. I'm currently on the step ladder, and this wall here is the longest wall that does not have the staircase in it because we want to use that as our start row. And I'm going to measure right off the edge of the 2x4, not the siding, and I'm going to measure over 48 3/4 inch. And make a mark, and he's going to do the same on his side. And we're going to snap a line for our first row. As you can see, I'm holding on the line. Go ahead and snap the line. All right, now as you can see, we got a nice chalk line for our first row. We need to make sure that we stagger our rows of subfloor. In order to do that correctly, we need to cut a full sheet directly in half right at 4 foot, and that's going to give us our staggered rows. So I'm going to slide a board under it first, and then we're going to cut it right in half. We now have our 2 that's going to be the starters to stagger our joints. When fastening the subfloor down to the joist, be sure to use the galvanized 8-penny 2.5 inch spiral shank nails. These are going to be used when you hand drive, but I'm going to be using my nail gun. I'm going to be using my 3-inch ring shank nails, the same ones that we use when framing the walls to shoot up through the bottom plate. So I'm going to make sure that the ring shank's used to secure the subfloor. So we're going to go ahead and start fastening down the subfloor now. You can see we are lined up on the chalk line with our first sheet, and make sure that the groove side is facing out and the tongue side is facing away from the building because our next sheet has to slide into here. So we're on our line. We now need to take our nail gun in this case, and we're going to nail every 6 inches. But for now, we're just going to tack it down until we get them all tacked down, then we'll nail them off. We're now going to place the 16 on center layout. I'm going to pull 15 1/4, and that's going to be the edge. So we need to move our joists to line up with our marks. So we're going to put our layout on here first. I told you. When installing subfloor in a house, we would typically put adhesive down before placing the subfloor. Since this is a barn, it's not a big deal. So we have a half sheet for our starter for the next row. Very important because we want to break halfway on each sheet. So whenever we place this together, we want the tongue side going into the groove, obviously. So we're going to slide that close to where it lines up. Then we want to make sure we break correctly. And that looks good. Now whenever we put this together, we're going to use our sledgehammer and a 2x4 on this end so it protects the edge. And we're going to tap it into this sheet and make sure we're in nice and snug. So we're going to tap that in now. Okay, you can see we got a nice tight groove here. And there's going to be an 1/8 inch of expansion around each sheet. So that's important because you want to make sure it expands and contracts properly. And then we just secure this down just like we did the full sheets. And obviously, just like the first sheets, we have to put our layout on it, 16 on center. And you'll notice as you run the boards, you want it to move the joists as much. The first ones, they're usually bowed, so you do got to get them lined up. But after that, you'll notice you won't have to move them near as much. And more or less, we rinse and repeat this process until we get to the stairs. To finish up the row that meets the steps, we have the sheet that is left over from where we cut it off for the landing. And you can see it's going to finish this up real nice, and then we're just going to take a saw to cut the opening out. So perfect place to use the other side of the landing sheet. Now that all the subfloor is tacked down to the joists, we're going to go through and nail it all off. You want to place your nails at least every 6 inches apart, so that way it's nailed down really well. So I'm going to start at the edge here and then start nailing it off. While you are building your structure, be sure to cover up material if it starts raining, especially the subfloor. You can see we placed plastic right over it, and we're weighing it down so that way the wind doesn't blow it off as well. Here's all the other material that we got covered up, and here's what it looks like underneath the floor joist after we got the subfloor installed. You can see it looks really good and clean. And then after we did that, we got the kits that's going to be for the trusses up onto the roof. And because I have this Bobcat, it was super easy. If not, you will have to probably take apart the pallets in order to get them on top of the floor. We separated all the material out of the 2 pallets and the extension boxes, so that way they're ready to go. And I have 2 10-footers that I cut down to 97.5 inches to start the truss build. And these are going to be for the gable truss. So we're going to lay these out right across the blue line here on the subfloor, so that way we can use that as kind of a guide for a straight edge. The first 2 2x6s you'll need are the truss legs, and that's these 2 71 3/8 inch long 2x6s. We're going to set them on the side, and then these 2 are the truss top. They're 81 3/4, so those are going to go to the peak. So 2 of these first, then 2 of those. Take note of the blue marks. Those are going to go in the peak, and the ones without the blue mark are going to go on each side. Yep. Here where the truss leg meets the bottom plate, we want to line up the cut off the side of the truss leg with the edge of the 2x4 bottom plate and place 2 2.5 inch screws to hold it together. And these screws are located in the hardware pack, and we're going to place this in here to hold it. And we do the same to the other side. Using the pre-cut 5.5 inch filler blocks, we're going to space these out, and it doesn't have to be anything exact. 2 here and then one here. And we'll do the same on the other side. And we literally are just gonna flush these up with this 2x6, then tack them on with 2 of my 2-inch nails. And they sent 6-penny nails for this. So you find your 6-penny nail to install these if you're not using a nailer. You should have something that looks like this after you place the OSB onto the boards. We now need to square up the truss before placing our gussets to hold the joints together. To do that, we need to measure off this corner to that corner and get 188.5 inches. And then we got to make sure this measurement diagonally is the same. So the key here is making sure you have the exact same diagonal measurement. Here. All right, this one's longer, so it tells me if this is longer, we need to shift the top that way. So we're going to pull this over. And right there's 188.5. So let's check this way. Using scrap blocks, we want to make sure that we place them on the edges now that we are square so that doesn't move, because we're going to use this as a template for the remaining truss. So we're going to place these down around the edges every so often so we have a good template to use. Here are all the gussets that's going to be for building all the truss. There are 4 different types. We're going to start out with the ones for the gable. We have 2 that's going to be for each gable truss that's going to go at the knee joint. Then we're going to have 1 that goes in each peak of the gable truss that's 1/2 inch. Then we're going to have our 3/4 inch gussets that's going to be for the center trusses. And these are going to be, the larger ones are going to go in the peak of the truss, and then the smaller ones are going to go at the knee joints of all the other trusses. So we're going to install the 1/2 inch ones on this gable truss first. To install these gussets, very simple. We're just going to line this peak up with the peak of the gusset, and then we're going to put it flush with the edge of the truss. Just like that, looks good. We're going to put 2 nails on each side. And then we use the other 2 on the other joints of this gable truss. All we need to do now is add another ply of the 2x6s with the same size that we put on the bottom that overlap that. Then we're just going to nail them together. And I'm going to be using my 3 1/4 framing nails here. So you want to use the framing nails to fasten these to the bottom part of the gable truss. The great thing is for framing the rest of this gable in, Best Barn's already pre-cut pretty much all of it for you, which is very nice unless you want to do a custom window here. But we got our peak that's going to nail right into this peak. Got our bottom of the window frame. We got our studs that are already pre-cut, has the bevel on it ready to go. We got the shortest, medium, then longest. The shortest ones are going to go right there at that joint. Then we're going to have one here, and then the frame for our window. So we're going to screw this in and screw the tops of the studs in. Then we're going to nail the bottoms and use a framing square to make sure we're setting square off the gable truss. This is where you frame out the window opening that you want and that you're going to be placing. I'm going to be doing a 36 by 36 inch rough opening like I explained earlier in this video for these windows as well. And the great thing here is you already got the material that was delivered in the boxes. So all we got to do is place one of these boards on each side of the window, and we may have to cut it down some to fit, and that's okay. But we're going to place one on each side of this opening, then we're going to take the other 2 to frame in whatever dimension we want, and then we got a 37.5 inch board to be cut down for our windowsill. So I'm just going to frame this up real quick, very straightforward. gable truss is now framed. I'm going to slide this out of the way for now before putting the LP SmartSide panels on, because we're going to put those on right before we set it. But I'm going to go ahead and pre-build the next truss that run in the middle of the barn. You can see that the 2x4 blocks that we placed on the deck when we built the gable truss is going to act as a jig for when we build the center trusses. And the great thing here is it takes the same 2x6s, so it's the same idea as the gable truss, except we're not going to place the 2x4s at the bottom. That's going to be open, of course. So we're going to place our 2x6s around the sides here. We have the 2x6 laid around, and you got to slide them so that they all line up against the block and that the cuts all line up well. Now that they're all laid where we need them to be, we're going to place 2x4 blocks to keep them spaced off the blocks that we had for our gable. Because we built this jig using the gable truss had a 2x4 here as the bottom plate, if you remember correctly. So because of that, we're going to substitute this area here and space it out with a 2x4 block so that it does not move while we're installing the gussets. And place one on this side as well. For each of the middle trusses, we're going to have 3 of the 3/4 inch thick gussets. And these are going to be installed to where the smaller ones, which are these two, are going to go at each side joint, and then the middle joint here at the peak, we're going to use the larger one. And when you install these, you want to make sure that you use wood glue. Place a liberal amount of wood glue here. We're then going to place this so that the edges are flush on the side, and we want to make sure the center of this lines up with the center of the peak of the truss. That looks good. Now we're going to place 3 rows of nails 6 inches apart to secure this down. And here we are using the 6-penny nails if you're hand driving these, and I'm just using my 2-inch nails that I use for installing the LP SmartSide to secure these down. And I'm going to hand drive these to make sure they're down all the way. For the other 2 joints, we follow the same process using the other gussets. We're now going to flip the truss over. We now place the same size gussets at each corner as we just installed, and we don't have to be on the jig for this step. We already have the correct position of the 2x6s, we just got to re-secure those joints with more gussets. Now that I showed you how to build a center truss, all I have to do is rinse and repeat that for 14 more trusses to give me a total of 15 center trusses to complete the truss build for the middle ones. And then I got to build 1 more gable, so I have 2 gables ready to go. Before we set the gable, we need to set the braces up against the side of the barn. But before we do that, we need to trim out the front face here on the gable ends. And in order to do that, Best Barn sent strips of the same LP SmartSide that we installed on the side of the barn to pad out right up here where this plate is, so that the trim goes on flush with the wall. And they also sent 1x4s that are just straight pine, and these are going to nail right to the side flush with the top of the subfloor. And then we're going to go around the face of the barn on the gable end with it. And you could upgrade the PVC board here if you'd like, so that way it's more apt to last longer. So that's going to be up to you, but we're going to install the 1x4 and the pad to finish up the gable end. I recommend using a speed square or straight edge to make sure that your trim is flush with the wall. When placing the 1x4 that's going to be horizontal, I like to do what's called a scarf joint. That's where you place a 45-degree bevel at the end of the board where the joint's going to be, and then you 45 the one that's going to butt into it. You can see it gives you a nice joint. Now that we got the trim boards on, we can place our bracing here for the gable. How we're going to do this is we're going to place 2, a 2x6 12-foot here, then a 2x6 12-foot here. And we got to make sure we pad out with a 2x4 off the wall, because we got to miss this trim board, and the sheeting that's going to go over the gable is going to be on there as well. So 1.5" lumber will be just fine. So after we pad it out, we're going to take the 2x6s and nail them to that. And that's going to support the gable truss whenever we set it so it doesn't fall off the edge. Very important. This gable is going to be standing up where the camera's at, but we're limited for deck space here, so it's kind of on an angle for now. But we got to place the LP SmartSide panels on now, and Best Barnes did send the first piece pre-cut. Then it's going to be 2 fulls, and then there's one pre-cut to length there for the end that we just got to trim off the sides. So we're going to go ahead and place the LP SmartSide on just like we did on the other walls on this building. But one nuance here when you're placing the LP SmartSide is we need to make sure we have a 3/4 overhang off this bottom. It's going to overhang the trim boards that we placed on the gable side of this building. We're going to stand the gable truss up now. This is where you need plenty of help, and you also need plenty of braces on standby, because when we lift this up, we're going to have to brace it and nail the bottom onto the plate. And we also need to make sure that we have an 1.5" overhang on each side so that we're centered up with the gable wall. And we need to make sure we are setting plumb with our level when we secure it. So we're going to go ahead and lift this up and set it into place. As you just seen, setting that gable wall with 2 guys really wasn't that difficult. So what we did here, after we stood it up, I got an 1.5" on each side to make sure we were centered. Then I went outside with the 8 penny nails, nailed along the edge to make sure we are flush with the wall. So now we have just a little bit of overhang with the LP SmartSide over the trim. So that got our bottom where it needs to be. And then we just nailed along the bottom and then plumbed up our wall and braced it. So it's very straightforward, not too difficult. We now need to place a 2x6 12-foot long plate starting out at the edge of each gable, and we're going to have an 1.5" overhang to match that gable truss. But we need to measure off this plate's edge 19 3/8 to start our layout, then it's 2 foot on center after that. Now that you have your layout on the plate, we're going to place a straight line using a speed square on the marks. To nail the 2x6 plate down, I'm going to be using my 3 1/4 inch framing nails. Now, Best Barnes did send 10 penny nails for this, and make sure you get your 1.5" overhang as you go off the wall's 2x4. So after you place a nail to hold the edge, make sure you get an 1.5" as you go. And just keep nailing it off and keep your 1.5" overhang. Repeat the same process for this plate. I have one side of the truss, he has one side of the other, and we're going to set our truss right on the layout that we place on the 2x6 plate. Instead of putting the hangers on now, I'm just going to toenail them onto the layout. Then I'll put the hangers on after they're all set. And when you set the bottoms on, make sure that you're lined up with the edge of the 2x6 and that you're right on your layout on the X. In order to stabilize the top of the truss, I got a 2x4 with the same layout that we placed on a 2x6, except we have an extra 3.5 inches that's going to hook onto the gable truss. We're going to nail this across the top as we go. All right, we're now on our layout, so we just rinse and repeat that for all the middle truss. After all the trusses are set, I'm now going to nail on the joist hangers to secure the truss to the plate. I'm using the metal strap nailer just like I did below when installing the floor joist. I'm here at the front gable. I'm up on scaffolding. It's going to be easier to work off scaffolding for this, but I got to place 2x4 boards that were supplied by Best Barnes, and they're going to go flush with the top of the gable truss. And you'll notice that we have blue marks at the ends of these as well. That's going to indicate that these are going to be for the peak. Then there's other 2x4s with angles cut on them as well, and that's going to be for the sides. We're going to start with the blue marks at the peak first. Now he's going to go in from the inside because I can't quite see the peak, just to make sure we are flush with the top, and he's going to hold me in place as I nail it. All right, he's going to use a straight edge here to make sure we are flush. We're now going to use the other 2x4s that do not have the blue mark and line them up flush with the very edge. Locate the 8-inch soffit strips that's for the gable end. These are just the LP SmartSide ripped down in 8-inch sections. And then you want to locate the stainless steel screws. We're going to start with this lap edge, and we're going to start at the knee of the gable truss. And we're going to begin by placing the screws to hold it to the 2x4 board. Then we're going to take the lap joint that's going to butt into it. And that way the water will shed correctly, and it also is going to give you a better looking joint. Then we're going to cut to finish the ends. And here's a pro tip: pre-start your screw so that way you're not trying to hold it and start your screw at the same time. Now that these two are started from the knee joint, we need to cut to finish up to the peak and cut to finish down below. So we're going to go ahead and address the peak now. There's going to be 4 blocks sent that's going to fit at the end of each gable like so. You'll notice that the piece of LP SmartSide is flush with the 2x4 that we just installed on the gable. We're going to place 2 screws here to hold it into place. And we're going to butt it tight right to the 2x4 plate of the gable. And install one of those at each gable end. I'm here at the middle of the wall between the 2 gable blocks, and I'm going to measure down 10 inches off the bottom of our truss plate and make a mark. Then we're going to chalk a line from this mark to our blocks, so that way we have a 10-inch chalk line to go off of to install the center supports for the soffit. All right, we'll chalk from this way to the other side. We now have a chalk line to go off of for our blocks. Locate the pre-built soffit blocks. They're going to be installed in this orientation so that it matches the one that's on the gable. And we're going to install it right to where that red line or the chalk line is going to be at the bottom of the block. And you want to place one at every other stud. So every other stud, you just need to secure them with 2 screws at each stud. Do that down the whole wall. Locate the 5 1/4 inch wide LP SmartSide strips. These are going to act as the soffit under this side. Now your first one to start out with off the rear gable is we got to cut it down to 33 inches in order to start, and we're going to hold it flush with the end of this, and that's going to give us our soffit. And anywhere we have a joint that does not break on a block, we're going to have to use the small 2x4 cent to join them together. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and install these to the bottom of these blocks. Here's where you would use the scrap block to join together the butt joint. So we're just going to hold this here and place 2 screws, and then our next one would be joined together there as well with 2 screws. We're now ready to begin sheeting the roof. And what we did, we carried all of our 4x8 full sheets that were delivered up here, so we have them stacked in various piles. We also divided all of our different lengths in the piles that were sent by Best Barnes. So the starter is already pre-cut for us, which is phenomenal. So I'm going to show you the layout that is with the instructional book so you understand how this is going to be laid out. Here's the page that you want to reference when you go to install the sheathing. If you look here, we need to start with our pre-cut 59-inch one that was sent. Then the 83s after that, but the first row is to be cut down to 36 inches wide. So we're going to install the full sheets in between and then end at a cut piece. And then you can see we have a 48-inch piece here in the middle of the second row. So you got to keep note of those types of things. So this is going to be one side and then the other side is going to match this. So we're going to chalk a line down from the knee joint 48 inches. We pre-cut all the sheets of plywood before we even started the installation. A little tip here, you can stack multiple sheets together and cut them so you can do multiple cuts at once. We set up a row of scaffolding to work this first row. It's going to be much easier to nail it off and work safely instead of moving a ladder multiple times. So the first sheet that we ripped down to 3 feet, that's 59 inches long, is going to go here, and we marked 6.5 inches on the sheet to make sure that we come flush with this soffit that we placed already. So we're going to slide the sheet out here, lay it on the chalked line to the top part, and then we're going to nail it every 6 to 8 inches using my 2 3/8 galvanized ring shank nails. Now you're going to use 6-penny nails if that's the nails that you're going to hand drive that were sent by Best Barnes. So keep that in mind. So we're going to slide this out, line up the chalk line, get our overhang correct, and then nail it into place. As you can see, we got our overhang to match the soffit, 6.5 inches. Now that we have it tacked on, we're going to nail down the layout for the 2 foot on center, and we also mark 2 foot on center on this plywood as we go to make sure our layout is running properly. So we're going to tack this off now. And remember the blocks that we placed for the soffit, we can place nails into those from here as well. When we go to install the next row after we complete this bottom row, we need to install plywood clips in between every row, and these are going to go in between each one of the trusses, and what that does is help support, because there is no truss here, so it binds together the 2 pieces of plywood and makes it much stronger. So everywhere there's a break here between, we need to install a clip. Now that the sheathing's on, we can install the 2x4s that are going to go flush with the end of the roof, and it's also going to go flush with your soffit. That's why we had the overhang the way it is, because we're going to fill it in with the 2x4 to give us a place to secure the fascia board. So we're going to slide this in here now and secure it to the boards. I'm going to use my galvanized nails that I use to place the panels onto the wall, so that way you clearly won't have rust that way. So I'm going to nail this from the top and underneath here to secure it. And these 2x4s are just like the ones we placed against the wall initially. The blue mark is in the peak, and then the rest are going to lay where they belong. Now that we have the 2x4s on, those are going to be a place to nail the fascia to. Again, same idea, blue mark to the peak, then the rest follow the same angle. So we're going to nail this on with my galvanized nails. When we nail these on, we need to make sure we're flush with the roof sheathing. This is going to go flush with the top of the roof. That's all there is to finishing up the front gable. Now the rear gable is very simple. I just got to nail the 1x material, same layout, but on the rear side it does not have this 8-inch overhang. To finish the soffit on the gables, Best Barn sent 1x blocks to finish it up, which after they are installed looks really good. With the remaining 1x4s left, they just need cut the length, and we're going to hold these flush with the trim board on each gable end and then nail them into place. I'm going to install the shingles next. That includes the drip edge, the roof paper, and the shingles themselves. Because that process requires a lot of details, I created a standalone video, and I'll put a link to it in the description below so you can reference that to see exactly how I install the shingles on this barn. It's now time to install the transom door. Locate the box that has all the transom door components in it, and then separate them so that way everything's easy to grab and install as you go. After you do that, we're first going to cut down the 2 pieces of side trim that's going to go on each side of the opening. These are 3 3/4 inches, and they are simply LP SmartSide cut down in the strips. So we're going to place down each side of the opening now, and I'm going to cut this a little bit up off the concrete just like we did when we installed the LP siding to begin with. I'm going to get my measurement, and we got 83 1/8. So we're going to cut down the side pieces to 83 1/8. To secure the trim around the opening and these sideboards, I'm going to use the same galvanized ring shank nails that I used to install the LP SmartSide. To install this, very simple. I'm going to place it where it belongs, lift it up tight to the top of the opening, line it up flush with the exterior of the building. Then we're going to shoot it on with a few nails. Next, we need to install the trim on the exterior of the opening. And we have the 1/2 inch thick trim boards this time, and these are 3 1/2 inches wide. And now we need to make sure that we hold 3/4 inch up higher than the opening here, because this is going to act as the door stop, as part of the door stop once we have the door installed. So we're going to mark 3/4 inch on the side of this trim first, so that way it's already marked so we know where to hold it when we secure it. And I'm going to hold this flush with the board that we installed on the side of the opening. And we don't have to put a ton of nails into this because we're going to be installing our hinges here, so it's going to secure it with the screws, so a few nails to hold it into place. And do the same to the other side. I'm now going to chalk a line from the top of this trim board to the top of this trim board to give us an equal 3/4 inch string line to go off of when we install our trim above the opening. To install the keystone, we need to hold it on that 3/4 inch line that we made in the very center of the opening. So I'm going to mark the center of the keystone. I'm also going to mark the center of the opening and then line them up and hold it on a 3/4 inch line. Now locate the remaining 2 pieces of trim, and they're just going to butt right up to the keystone, then overhang the side trim boards. And they do have different angles on the different sides, so make sure you match the angle up to the keystone where it belongs. That's all there is to installing the trim around the door. Here are the two panels that's going to make up the whole transom door. We have a right panel that has a hole here for the door handle. Then we got the left panel that's easy to distinguish because it does not have a hole in it. And it's also printed at the top back side of each door left, and then the top back side has the right on the right door. But we need the left panel first for this installation. So we're going to take the left panel and sit on the sawhorses with the back facing up. Right up. Locate the remaining strip that came with the door kit. This is the LP SmartSide rip down again as well, and it's the 3 3/4 inch piece. Now we need to cut it down to 83 inches to act as a door stop on the left panel, and you need to visualize this here. Imagine the door sitting on the left side of the opening. In the center of it is where this is going to be installed as the door stop. So essentially we're going to install the side that's finished facing out towards the exterior of the door. You now need to locate the square drive screws that are 1.5 inches long, and that's what we're going to use to secure this to this edge. And we need to make sure that we install this with a 3/4 inch overhang on this side of the door, again, to act as a door stop. So we're going to screw these in every so often to the door. So essentially we're going to line this up flush with the top of this 2x4 frame, and it's going to hang down lower because we're going to screw our latch to that later. And if we don't hang this down lower, it won't give you enough area to screw your latch to at the very bottom. You'll still have places to screw up here, but for your bottom 2 screws on the latch, this must extend down. And we're going to get a 3/4 inch overhang here. Then place a screw to hold it. And we're going to go ahead and get our 3/4 inch at the bottom, middle, and top first. I'm going to place the remaining screws into that board. That's all there is to installing the door stop. We now need to flip the door over and install the hinges. We now need 3 of the hinges along with the black 2-inch screws, and these are also square drive. And something to think about here, like I always say when installing the doors, visualize, because you want to make sure you get these hinges on the right side. I know since the door stop's on the one side, clearly these go on the other, but always visualize. So we know this is at the left side of the opening, the hinges need to be on this side. And in order to start the installation, take the hinge and fold it down to where we have a 90-degree angle and that the hinge is facing up. And I'm going to go 3 inches up and 3 inches down on the door, and that's going to hit us in the solid part of the frame. Then the hinge here in the middle is going to be exact center of this trim piece. So we're going to go ahead and install these using the black screws now. Holding the hinge square against the frame, we're going to measure up 3 inches to this center hole and place the 4 screws to hold it onto the door. And do that at each hinge site. We're going to install the left panel into place. What I'd highly recommend that you do, 1, have a helper. 2, be sure to get a proper thickness piece of wood and place it down where the door is going to set first. So that way, whenever you set your door into place, it's going to have it elevated about to the proper distance up. Whenever we set this, we want to have just about an 1/8 inch gap between the trim and the door. If you have a 1/4 inch gap, that's really fine too, but we like to shoot for around an 1/8. And then we're going to set that into place and get it plumbed up before placing the screws in the hinge. And another pro tip, check your opening now and see what kind of distance you might have between the top and bottom, and have those shims available now, so that way you don't have to search for them, and you'd put those to gap the door properly before installing it. All right, I'm going to check the opening here at the level, and we are setting really plumb, so we actually probably won't need any shims here, just so you know. I have my impact driver ready. I have my step ladder so I can reach a top hinge easy, and I have my helper here. So he's going to grab this side door. I'm going to take this side. We're going to set it right into the opening. So actually we end up taking out that bottom piece of wood and we're sitting on the concrete because there must be a little hump here in the concrete. And we're actually sitting pretty darn close where we want it. So we're just going to shift it up with some shims in order to raise it just a little bit here. And we'll screw it right to this trim board. We're now sitting on shims and that's about where we want it there. So we're going to place one screw in each hinge for now. All right, we're going to remove this shim now and he's going to prop it up just a little bit to help the reveal out up top. All right, now that we got our reveals where we want them, we're going to place a screw here. All right, we're going to double check our reveals. Before I place another screw in the middle hinge, I'd like for you to take note. Notice this is slightly tighter here than here. Again, it's very slight, but because the weight of these doors, I do intend for them to settle a little bit. So you want to compensate for that now. And if they do settle down the road, you can adjust the hinges again then as well. But just to compensate slightly now, that's what we did. So I'm going to put one more screw in these hinges so that way we have 3 screws holding. I don't want to put all the screws in yet until we set the other door in case there's some more adjusting that needs made. And obviously the hinges are going to go on this side because we're going to anchor to this side of the opening. When we install this door, we simply rinse and repeat what we did with the left panel, except this time we're going to notice the center reveal a little more because now we have a door to go against. So we're going to have to check that to make sure we're setting right. But other than that, we install this door the exact same way. You can see I got the reveals around the door where I want them, and I also have the center reveal looking really nice. So after that settles just a little bit, it's going to give me the perfect reveals around the whole door. You now need to locate the 2 latches that came with the door kit and the screws for installing them. We're going to place one here at the bottom and one at the top. Now the one here at the bottom is going to be placed in the concrete. So I have a 3/8 masonry bit on a hammer drill that I'm going to have to drill out for the latch to stop. Now he's on the outside of the door and I'm going to hold this latch right here against that wood strip that we installed before. And we're going to hold it towards the center of it. And we're going to mark on the concrete exactly where we need to drill the hole to latch the door. So he's going to let me know when it's in place here. All right, how's that bottom look? Right there? Good there? All right, now I'm going to mark it where it hits the floor to be drilled out. Okay, I'm now going to drill that hole with the masonry bit. I'm now going to hold the latch onto the door and line it up with that hole and place it onto the door. And it might have been a little better to fasten this to the door first, but either way should get you good results. All right, now drop the latch into the hole to make sure it lines up before placing the other screws. That's why I mentioned dropping this wood down earlier. If you don't, you won't be able to catch these 2 bottom screws for the latch. So now you can see that lines up really well. Now we got to do the same to the top of the door. This latch at the top, same idea. We're going to hold it here in the center, hold it down just a little bit from the top, and we're going to place it onto the door. All right, now with the door shut all the way tight against the door stop, we're going to tap the bottom of this to make an indentation into the wood. All right, and we're now going to drill this out. And you can see that's all there is to installing the latches. Now this door is secured. As for the door handle, very simple. We're going to slide it right through this 1/2-inch hole that's in the right panel. Then we're going to keep it to where we are setting plumb with the holes here. And then we're going to place these 2 screws into this handle's hole in the top and bottom. To install the inside component, we need to make sure we know what position locked and unlocked is. Right here is where it's unlocked, so we want to make sure when we install the inside piece that this piece is facing down like this, so whenever it's locked, it turns like this and locks. So we're going to turn this down. Now we know if we turn it like this, that's in the locked position. So now that we're in the locked position, We're going to slide this over this area, then tighten the Allen screw once we are snug against the left panel. So that way, whenever we turn this to shut it, it's going to be tight. So we're going to tighten up that Allen screw now. All right, so to exit, we can turn this to open up the door. Now when we shut it, we can turn and lock the door. And now our barn door is locked and secured. So these transom doors are awesome for security and for a nice finished door. Because shortly in this video I'll be painting this barn with a sprayer, I did not want to put the glass in yet, so as you can see in this clip after it was painted, I placed sealant around the opening where the window is to be installed. Then I placed the window into the opening and secured it with the supplied screws, and that's all there is to installing the windows in the doors. Of course, I did the door around back as well. I must say, at first I was a little skeptical of these doors because they were so large and pre-built, but after installing them, I was amazed at the quality and the craftsmanship that was put into these doors. I highly recommend them. Next, we installed the side door. I have plenty of videos on my channel going into the detail of installing these, but essentially you'd set the door into the opening with the brick mold holding it against the barn, and then you would place the hinge screws in and make sure that the reveals are correct. And you can see here they are all in, and check the reveal like I just mentioned and make sure that you're sitting in line. Now place a screw right here into the latch side so that way it adds security. So I'd recommend doing that, and you can see the door looks fine sitting there into place. If you're wondering if you can change the handing on the transom door so that the other panel opens up, and the answer is yes, but you need to pay close attention when doing this. I did it here by switching the left panel to the right side and the right panel to the left side, and then I placed the hinge over the hole that was already drilled in the door and then drilled a new hole for the handle. And I would recommend placing sealant over the pre-existing hole before placing the hinge on, and I did tape around the hinges before painting, as you can see on the front and back transom door. I'll also mask around the concrete so when I'm spraying the paint it doesn't get on it. And I did the same to the side door as far as the glass and the threshold. Anywhere a nail missed a stud when nailing off the panels, I made sure to keep it sticking out so I knew to patch a hole there before painting. Also, anywhere there was a nail sunk too deep, I made sure I patched that like I mentioned when installing the LP SmartSide. I now can begin the painting process. I'm going to be using a classic red exterior barn paint. I'm going to be spraying it using my sprayer hooked to a generator for power since I am in a remote location. Something for a word of caution here: if you're going to be using a sprayer, be careful not to get it on the shingles because the roof, as you can see, is right here next to the wall, so you can turn the pressure down low and spray directly upwards to whenever spraying the soffit, but be careful of the overspray. I did hit the shingles a little bit here and there, but you really can't notice, and also with a slight breeze it can wick the spray up over the barn and on top of the roof too, so be very careful if you're going to be using a sprayer for painting. Recommend removing the masking as soon as you're done painting. That way you don't pull off any paint if it dries with the tape. I did spray 3 total coats, and you do want to wait in between coats in order for it to dry before spraying the next coat. After the base coat of red was on, I used an exterior white paint, same brand as I did for the red, and painted all the trim. Now it is a much slower process than spraying with a sprayer obviously, and also you got to cut around all the hinges on the door, the latch, All the trim boards need cut up to the red panels. It does take a lot more time if you're wanting to accent the trim, but it makes the barn look so much better with that trim painted white. It only took 2 coats of the white paint to paint the trim. It took a total of a day and a half to paint the barn. It probably would have took 2 days total if I did use a roller instead of a sprayer. Now that the garage is painted, I can install the windows. I first need to cut out the rough framing using a Sawzall like we did for the doors. Now the reason why you want to wait is obviously you don't want to tape up the windows in order to paint. You want to put these in after the painting. So this window was supplied by Best Barns. I ended up upgrading to the bigger window, but their window is 36 inch tall and 18 inches wide, and it came with shutters, which is really nice. But I needed a little bit bigger opening for what I was going to use this barn for. So this window that I got has a nailing flange on it, similar to the flange that's on the window supplied by Best Barns, except this has J-channel, to where when I trim out this window, I can slide the trim behind this channel, and that's going to give it a little different finished look than the one that was supplied by Best Barns. But again, that is a very nice window as well. Either one will work fine, but we're going to go ahead and cut out the openings and install the windows. To install the window, it's very important to place silicone, or what I'm going to use here is called Quad, and in fact this is called Quad Max. It's really excellent sealant to use for exterior purposes. But I'm going to run a nice liberal bead right here around the edge where the window is going to set. You don't have to hit the very bottom, because in fact if water goes down there you want it to drain out. So you want to go down and around the top and down this side. And again, a nice liberal bead, because that's what's going to seal the moisture out. So I'm going to place that around the opening first. Before placing the window into the opening over the caulking, I'm going to make sure that I have my roofing nails and hammer available. This would be great if you had 2 people. One person can hold a window in there, the other person can nail it, but I'm just going to sit the window up there and nail it. And the great thing about these windows, they're very light, so not too bad to do. All right, we now need to check to make sure that we are plumb. So let's use our 4-foot level. You can see there it looks really good. So I think we are good to go. And now all we need to do is place a nail in each one of the nailing flange holes, and the window is secured. I'm now going to place trim around the window. And something I did have to do, because of this area here, it's thinner than the 3.5 inch trim board. So I did have to rip down this top piece on these side windows. But the ones on the gable ends that are in the very top, I can go right around them, don't have to rip them down. I'm going to place this up here first and not nail it, because I want to place my sides on to center this top up with the sides. Now we can place these back into the J channel of the window. So that's going to give us the best look. I'm going to shoot that on with the nailer. And this is our standard galvanized nails. Now we'll center this up. That looks pretty good. Now place on our bottom trim. Same idea, center it right up. Now I'm just going to dab a little caulk right over these nail holes. That's all there is to installing a window. Now I'm going to install the windows just like that around the whole barn. Now that the barn is complete, I am very excited to be able to try it out and pull my Bobcat in, and it pulled into the doors with no problem. You can see the height of this Bobcat had me a little cautious pulling in at first, but you can see we actually had at least 2 inches of clearance here at the top, and on each side we had at least 5, so it pulled in real comfortable. It is nice to have all this space and room around the Bobcat. I even placed the bucket on and put some things in here so you can see there's a ton of room in this barn. All right, I must say, mission accomplished. We now have a beautiful barn here on the property supplied by Best Barns. I can store my Bobcat in it, so everything turned out awesome. If you'd like to see how I installed the shingles on this barn, check out this video. It'll help you out.